Most people carry around an invisible companion, someone they think they will eventually become. Not next week, not next month, someday. The version of yourself who finally wakes up early every morning, who exercises consistently, who reads more books, who never procrastinates, who always says the right thing, who has confidence, who has purpose, who has everything figured out. Perhaps you've imagined that person thousands of times. Maybe you've even pictured where they live, how they dress, how they speak, how calm they seem, how productive they are. It is one of the strangest habits of the human mind. We spend years imagining a future version of ourselves, yet almost never become the exact person we imagined. At first, this seems like failure. Maybe life simply got in the way. Maybe responsibilities became too heavy. Maybe the world changed faster than expected. But psychology suggests something far more surprising. The real reason is not that you failed to become your future self. It's that your future self never actually existed. Think about that carefully. When you imagine yourself 5 years from now, your brain quietly builds a fictional character. That character feels real, detailed, familiar, almost like someone waiting for you at the end of a long road. But that person is created using today's emotions, today's knowledge, today's priorities, and today's imagination. In other words, your present mind is trying to predict a future mind that has not yet been created. It is a little like asking a 10-year-old child to accurately imagine being 80 years old. Some details might be correct, most will not. Psychologists call this one form of the future self illusion. We naturally assume that who we are now is close to our final version, that our beliefs are mostly settled. Our personality is nearly complete. Our priorities are becoming permanent. Researchers have discovered something fascinating. People of every age consistently believe they have changed dramatically during the previous decade, yet expect to change only slightly during the next one. 20-year-olds believe they are almost finished changing. 30-year-olds believe the same. 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, even 70-year-olds often underestimate how much they will continue changing. This phenomenon has become known as the end of history illusion. Not because history actually ends, but because every version of ourselves quietly believes, I've finally become me. Yet life keeps proving otherwise. The music you loved at 16 may barely interest you today. The career you once believed would define your identity may have quietly disappeared. The people you once couldn't imagine living without may now exist only as memories. Even your definition of happiness has probably changed more than you realize. None of this happened in one dramatic moment. There was no single morning when you woke up as a completely different person. The transformation happened invisibly. Conversation by conversation, book by book, mistake by mistake, one ordinary Tuesday after another, which raises an unsettling question. If your past self misunderstood who you would become, why are you so certain your present self understands who you'll become next? Perhaps the greatest illusion is not believing that people change. Perhaps it is believing that the one person who won't change is you. Imagine meeting the version of yourself from 10 years ago. That younger person would probably recognize your face, your voice, perhaps even your sense of humor. But after only a few hours of conversation, something strange would happen. They would begin noticing subtle differences, the opinions you defend today, the fears that no longer bother you, the dreams you've quietly abandoned, the priorities that slowly replaced old ambitions. Little by little, the conversation would begin to feel like speaking with a distant relative rather than with yourself. And the strangest part? The person sitting here today rarely notices this transformation while it is happening, because change is almost never experienced as change. It feels like continuity. Every morning you wake up believing you are essentially the same person you were yesterday. Your memories connect one day to the next so smoothly that your identity feels stable. Psychologists sometimes describe this as the narrative self. Instead of remembering millions of separate moments, your brain constantly edits them into one continuous story. That story creates the comforting illusion that one stable character has been present all along. But stories are rewritten all the time. Every meaningful experience quietly edits the next chapter. This becomes even more fascinating when we look at how the brain predicts the future. Your brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. Long before something happens, it is already guessing what will happen next. It predicts conversations, traffic, weather, people's reactions, even your own future behavior. When you imagine yourself 5 years from now, your brain doesn't actually see the future. It simply extends today's identity forward in a straight line. Today's confident person imagines becoming even more confident. Today's anxious person imagines finally becoming fearless. Today's ambitious person imagines achieving every important goal. But life almost never moves in straight lines. One unexpected friendship can redirect an entire career. One difficult loss can completely redefine success. One book can quietly replace beliefs you've held for decades. One conversation can change how you understand yourself forever. None of those events exist inside today's prediction, because prediction can only work with information you already have. The future, by definition, contains information your current brain cannot imagine. That is why almost every autobiography contains surprises. People rarely end up becoming exactly who they plan to become. Instead, they become someone shaped by countless experiences they never planned at all. There is another invisible force quietly influencing this process: identity. Most people believe identity creates behavior. I'm confident, so I speak confidently. I'm disciplined, so I work hard. I'm creative, so I make art. Sometimes that is true. But psychology increasingly suggests that the relationship also works in reverse. Behavior creates identity. Every action becomes evidence. Every repeated choice quietly answers the same question. Who am I? Read one book. Almost nothing changes. Read 100 books. Your identity begins shifting toward I'm someone who learns. Exercise once. Nothing remarkable happens. Exercise consistently for years. Eventually, you stop saying, I'm trying to get fit. You simply become someone who exercises. The same principle applies everywhere. Acts of kindness slowly create a kind person. Acts of courage slowly create a courageous person. Repeated dishonesty slowly creates someone who expects themselves to lie. Identity isn't discovered. It is accumulated. Like tiny drops of water slowly filling a lake. This creates an unexpected problem. When people imagine their future self, they often imagine identity arriving first. They believe one day they will wake up motivated, confident, disciplined, creative, and only then will they begin acting differently. Reality works almost exactly the opposite way. Action arrives first. Identity follows quietly behind. You never become confident before acting courageously. You become confident because you repeatedly survive moments that required courage. You never become disciplined before building habits. You become disciplined because habits slowly rewrite your self-image. Perhaps this explains why our imagined future self always feels slightly out of reach. We keep waiting to become someone, instead of noticing that becoming is exactly what every ordinary day is already doing. The future version of you isn't waiting somewhere ahead. That person is being constructed right now, choice by choice, habit by habit, almost too slowly to notice. And that realization changes everything. Because it means the question was never, when will I become the person I imagine? The better question is, what kind of person are today's smallest actions quietly creating? Perhaps this is why some of the happiest people no longer spend much time chasing an imagined future version of themselves. Not because they stopped growing. Quite the opposite. They simply realize that growth rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, one unnoticed morning at a time. Think back to who you were 7 years ago. You probably cannot identify the exact day your personality changed. There wasn't a single Tuesday when patience suddenly appeared. No afternoon when wisdom permanently arrived. No evening when fear completely disappeared. Instead, life reshaped you through thousands of almost invisible moments. Every disappointment taught something. Every friendship revealed something. Every mistake corrected something. Every success changed something. None of those experiences asked for permission before becoming part of your identity. They simply accumulated, like rings forming inside a tree. From the outside, growth appears invisible. From the inside, it is happening constantly. This explains one of the greatest paradoxes of adulthood. We often feel as though nothing is changing, until one day we look back and realize almost everything has. Perhaps you've experienced this before. You discover an old journal. You reread messages from years ago. You hear yourself defending opinions you no longer believe. You remember problems that once felt enormous, but now seem strangely small. For a brief moment, it feels as though you're reading about someone else, yet that person was you. not fake, not immature, simply unfinished. And so are you today. That realization is strangely comforting, because it means you don't need to predict exactly who you'll become. No one can, not even your own brain. The future version of you will be shaped by conversations you haven't had yet, books you haven't opened, places you haven't visited, people you haven't met, questions you haven't asked, losses you cannot imagine, opportunities that don't yet exist. How could today's imagination possibly predict all of that? It can't, which means the goal was never to become the person you imagine. The goal is to become someone your current imagination isn't capable of seeing yet. That is a much more exciting possibility, because imagination is always limited by the present. Reality is not. Psychologists have repeatedly found that people are remarkably poor at forecasting what will make them happy years into the future. We overestimate how long success will satisfy us. We underestimate how much relationships will shape us. We imagine achievements changing everything, while quietly overlooking the ordinary habits that actually transform us. A promotion changes your schedule. Daily curiosity changes your mind. A new house changes your address. Daily gratitude changes your character. One exciting opportunity may change your circumstances. But thousands of ordinary decisions create the person who lives inside those circumstances. Perhaps this is why chasing an ideal future self often feels exhausting. That person keeps moving. Every time you approach the image in your mind creates another one, a little wiser, a little happier, a little more successful. The finish line quietly moves again. Maybe it was never meant to be reached. Maybe the imagined future self was never a destination. Maybe it was simply a compass, not something to become, but something that gently encourages movement. And movement has always mattered more than perfection. The people who continue growing throughout life are rarely the ones who finally figure themselves out. They are the ones who remain curious enough to let themselves change. They collect beginnings instead of defending certainty. They welcome uncomfortable conversations. They learn unfamiliar skills. They revise old beliefs without feeling ashamed. They understand that identity is not something to protect. It is something to continually build. So perhaps the real question isn't, will I ever become the person I imagine? Perhaps that question has no answer. A better question is this: what kind of person is today's version of you quietly becoming? Even if you can't see it yet? Because 7 years from now, another version of you will look back at today. That future person won't remember every task you completed, every email you answered, every routine you repeated. They will remember the moments that quietly redirected your story, the conversation that changed your perspective, the book that challenged your assumptions, the risk that felt uncomfortable, the kindness no one applauded, the ordinary afternoon that became the beginning of an entirely different life. And perhaps they will smile, not because you became the person you once imagined, but because you became someone far more interesting than your imagination could ever have created. Maybe that has been the secret all along. The most meaningful version of yourself is never the one you can already picture. It is always the one you're still becoming.